Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. And you?
I'm fine.
So, curious meeting you. I just want to know, did you get permission from your husband to be here?
Because it's not right to show violence on video, I'm going to answer by saying I don't need my husband's permission to be here, but he does know that I'm here.
Oh, you're opening a can of worms, aren't you?
You started, not me.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is how far we've taken this whole thing about patriarchy, right? We've taken to the point where we believe that you're not even allowed to be an independent-minded, critical thinker or just an individual in your own right.
Exactly. And I think some people have been blessed either with the way they were raised or just with their personalities where they won't allow that.
Yes.
And some people unfortunately believe that that's the case. And yes, there is an element of respect. So being a married woman, and it goes both ways, neither my husband or I would just leave the house and just disappear and it's my business, right? But there's an element of respect to say, this is where I'm going to be, this is how long I'm going to be, and that's it. But I don't need anyone's permission for that matter to actually do what I'm doing.
That raises a very interesting point. But again, it might risk us going off topic. But I think it raises an interesting point about what it means for what we expect of ourselves and what we expect from our partners, right? Because there's a difference between respecting the role that you play and the role that someone else plays in your life, and then remaining focused on what it is that you're creating together versus just believing that I have a right to be a certain way and he must just expect it or accept it, or she must accept it, and you almost have this demand that you will find balance around me rather than us creating balance between us. And I mean, one of the things that that came through in our previous discussions that always still resonates very strongly with me is that patriarchy is not something that is independently and solely maintained by men or established by men.
Definitely. I think in our previous discussions we mentioned how patriarchy can actually manifest in a lot of women, and it's because how they were brought up and what they've been taught and how they've been socialized, and how women actually enable patriarchy to a certain extent, because that's the learned behavior.
Yeah.
And you know, in unpacking all of those things, I think we brought up quite a few interesting points to think about. One of the things that's driving home for me is a really important one, in that what is keeping patriarchy alive, denying us of?
Yes. And that's a critical thing, is we're so focused on wanting to maintain social order that we lose sight of the fact that the social order that we're maintaining has long since lost relevance in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And you know, that's the thing. Are we keeping a tradition alive just for the sake of it, or do we really understand what is the purpose of that tradition? And in this view, the purpose of that tradition is to uphold patriarchy, uphold misogyny, uphold the male stance over the women, you know?
But even in that, there was some purpose at some point that warranted that kind of a social structure, right? Whether it was right or wrong, justified, unjustified, separate discussion completely, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that at some point there was reason behind wanting these structures, and it served the greater good in a certain way.
I suppose so. Because I was born way after that time, I can't.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of these structures go back literally thousands of years, not necessarily just within the last couple of generations.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're upholding a way of life that is at odds with the demands that contemporary life places on us.
For sure. What is patriarchy denying us? It's, for me personally, it would deny me my freedom, my identity, my respect, my integrity, and most of all, and this can apply to everybody, not just me, it denies people of their humanness, of their humanity, whether you're a patriarch, a male or a female.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and it reminds me of a discussion I had yesterday with someone that says that when we start subscribing so strongly to the role that we play to fit into the structure, to fit into society or to the family unit, when we subscribe so strongly to the role, what we end up doing is we become defined by the role rather than bringing our unique contribution to the role.
Yes, and then we almost have a splintered view because we see ourselves as mother, wife, career woman, coach, versus this is Amina, holistically, and these are the roles I can fulfill at any given time.
Right, and the role you fulfill doesn't have to be a defined role because it's about you contributing value and fulfilling purpose in that moment.
Absolutely. So one of the things I love is, when I do a lot of work with couples, right? And they're like, so who's the leader, who's the follower? And for me, it's everyone.
Yes.
Because in a relationship, there are times that you need to lead, regardless of who you are. Because your spouse, your partner is getting tired or does not have the clarity or the energy or ambition that you do.
Or the insight.
Yeah, or the insight. And so sometimes you lead.
Right.
Then sometimes you need to follow because the reverse is true. And sometimes all you need to do is walk beside each other.
Yes.
So this thing of who's the head of the household and who leads whom and whatever, for me is as fluid as every day is.
It must be.
It just depends on the situation.
It must be fluid, because if it's not fluid, if you're always going to have one person leading and one person following, think about how that denies the humanness of the person that is expected to lead no matter what.
Yes.
Right?
And the pressure on them.
And the pressure on them. And this is what's happened is that because we've become so defined by how it is if we fit in with this patriarchal structure that has governed a lot of our lives for as long as we can remember, because we're so defined by it, we have lost sight of the fact that we're denying ourselves the ability to be human.
Yes.
And when the problem with that is that is at the heart of all the social ills that we've got, is because you can't expect someone to show up emotionally accessible, emotionally sensitive, emotionally in tune or mature if the very essence of emotion is being denied because of the role we expect them to play.
Zaid, I cannot tell you how many times we've had guests over and we're sitting in our lounge and there are men and women sitting there and the discussion is predominantly being led or had by males. And I have something to say and so I voice it, and then other people, the men in the room, look at me as if to say, how dare you speak? You're just supposed to sit quiet. Woman, this is a men's discussion. And I just love reveling in it because then I look at my husband and he just laughs because he knows, oh gosh, here we go. You've just started with the wrong woman.
Right.
But it's just simple things like that,
Exactly. So how do we change the tide? How do we change the narrative?
Exactly like that. So an example is that if I think I have something to contribute, I'm not going to diminish myself and say to myself, give that, that negative story that I'm a woman and this is not my place. If I feel I have something to contribute to a conversation, I will say what I need to say.
Right.
And these are small kinds of things that I think we need to start putting in practice. So for example, if you're in a relationship and you hit a speed bump for some sort, waiting for your husband to find the solution or lead the way where you have a clear picture around how to get over it. I'm not saying bulldoze and diminish your husband and say you're useless. Say honey, or whatever you call them, habibti, whatever you want to call them, and say perhaps let me navigate this one because I feel that I have a clearer idea. We do that with disciplining our children as well. There are times when my husband sees it in a certain way and he says, okay, I'll deal with the situation.
Right.
And there are times when I see it in a different way and I'll say, I'll deal with the situation. So it's also role fluidity. That's how we start breaking this patriarchy.
I always love to tell this little bit about when it comes to leading.
Yeah.
Because we always have such massively complicated and complex and just ridiculous definitions of what leadership is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And the best definition I've ever heard so far is that you are a leader the moment you do more than is expected of you.
Okay.
Right? So if you consider that, you'll only do more than is expected of you if you believe you have value to contribute beyond what is asked of you.
Yes.
But you won't believe that you have value to contribute if you are defined by a role in society. You'll only want to fulfill the expectation of society or of your family unit, because you believe that that is all that you are allowed to do, and because you are so fixated on maintaining social order and wanting to honor your family and maintain your izzat, that what you're going to do is you are going to restrain yourself from being a complete human being.
Absolutely.
And then when you become frustrated, guess who you expect to make you feel better about yourself? Your partner.
Yeah.
But because you are both very, very entrenched in this patriarchal way of living your life, you're expecting him to be a fully formed human being who has emotional maturity and a developed sense of understanding of what is making you feel the way you do. And when he can't show up the way you need him to show up, you claim, well, men, they're insensitive. Patriarchy, that's why women are nothing, and that's why women have to take a back seat and all that. No.
Look, so you touched a very important point, okay, when you spoke on Izzat, and you
Yes.
spoke about women taking a back seat. I would love to think that my family's proud of me and they think I'm doing a good job with the Izzat, but I am very far from taking a back seat, very far from containing myself,
Right.
because society expects it from me. That doesn't mean that I purposely rebel or purposely challenge or push boundaries just because I want to be known for that.
Yes.
I push boundaries and challenges in as far as they no longer serve me and make sense to me and my situation.
And critically important is how you go about pushing those boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we want others to accept us with our humanness, we need to also see their humanness in that moment. So in a moment of weakness, in a moment of ignorance, in a moment of distraction, when someone wants to maintain a structure or a level of decorum that goes against recognizing you as a fully respected human being, then you need to understand why it is that they are invested in that way of thinking and that way of life. Now, you're not going to win any hearts or do yourself any favors if you're going to try and go out there and prove to everyone why it is that they're part of a problem.
Yeah.
And why it is that you are there to correct them.
Yeah.
Because you must want for your brother what you want for yourself.
Exactly.
You must want for others what you want for yourself. That's authenticity, that's sincerity.
Yeah.
So when you challenge that, you need to challenge it in a way that doesn't end up being demeaning, that doesn't diminish the standing of that person, and that doesn't unnecessarily expose their shortcomings in front of others.
Absolutely. So, unconditional positive regard. I say this every single time,
Yes.
right? And the other thing is to do things with purpose and do it for yourself. To your point, understand why you're doing this, not to diminish the other person, but because you have connected with a value deep within yourself that says this system doesn't serve me.
Yes.
Not so much of I want to change all the men in society, okay, but I do, but I don't, right?
Good luck.
Hey, I pick my battles. But almost, I want to change my situation for myself.
Right.
So the way for me to break this pattern, to break patriarchy, because it's well and fine, we're talking about what patriarchy is and how it's manifested and what the effects are and what it's denying from us. The thing is, okay, so we know this, what do we do about it? And how do we break this? How do we change it?
Yes.
And understand that you'll only change it for yourself. You can't change other people.
There's nothing so bad that there is no good in it.
Okay.
So if there's nothing so bad that there is no good in it, what you need to also recognize is that as much as patriarchy has held us back and is causing a lot of oppression and harm in many ways on a social level, there are some elements of it that would have created structures of security and belonging in certain ways. So what we're trying to do is we're not trying to undo patriarchy. What we're doing is we want to recalibrate society so that we are more meaningful and wholesome in how it is that we engage with each other, and that in itself will take care of the imbalance that patriarchy has caused.
What you said about safety really resonated with me just now, because yes, that is one of the reasons why perhaps those those practices were implemented.
Yes.
And then my question is, so given the changes in society and given where we are today,
Yes.
two questions actually. As Muslim men, how do we create a society community for our women to feel safe and not oppressed, right? And for women, given the fact that we can be accountable for ourselves now, and we can also, to an extent, look after our own safety, how then can we I love that word, recalibrate, okay? Because we're not talking about undoing patriarchy. How can we recalibrate things to make things a bit better? So those are really two very important points, because we need to start making this community safe for our women.
Yes.
Nobody can deny that, okay? And it starts at home.
Exactly.
So that's a huge question, both for men and women. What are your men doing to make you feel safer, and what are you doing to safeguard yourself?
Are you respecting the individuality and the value of the child you're raising, or are you shaping them to fit into a structure that's going to diminish them?
Yes.
Right? Because
Yes.
that's what we do. So part of this whole thing is that the best way to change something that is bad is not always necessarily to go in and try and change that thing. We know what doesn't work for us about patriarchy. We know what it is in some form or another. We have a sense, whether we're aware of it or not, but we have a sense that guides us, that says that, listen, this doesn't feel right. And if something doesn't feel right, and you see that there's some harm coming from it, or the harm is not necessarily so blatant that you recognize it, but you do know that some more good can come from it if you just change something about it. The idea is not to now focus on dismantling what's bad, but it's about stop investing your time and your effort in what's bad, and just invest your time in what it is that you know is going to create more good.
Absolutely love it.
And that way you don't become this massive rebel that is going out there to want to change the world. No. You change yourself and the world will change with you.
Exactly. If you can't change the people, change the people. So
No. No.
I love it. So really, I love that. You know, stop focusing, because I believe in the law of attraction. So what you focus on is what you're going to attract.
Right.
So if you just leave patriarchy alone and say, it's not my cup of tea, this is what I want for my life, from my life, with the people in my life, you're going to start making those things happen. So there isn't this massive revolution that we're trying to create, or rebellion. It's literally just flex your lens of your structure of interpretation, look at it from a different perspective, and say, this is how I'm going to go forward. So you don't necessarily have to unpack all of those past things. You can just draw a line and say, this is my new journey.
Yes. We need to create space in our life for that which we want in our life.
Yes.
And similarly, we need to create space for those who are significant to us to be able to arrive in that space in a way that is not going to be demeaning or diminishing to them.
Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And as soon as we start doing that, we'll realize that our ability to create that space demands that we take accountability for what it is we're contributing towards what it is that we find we are at odds with in our life.
The wonderful thing about creating a new space, and I don't know if people have observed this even in social settings. So literally you could apply a real tangible example. If you're at a gathering and you automatically move, trust me, people come and fill the empty spaces.
Yes.
So the minute you create a new space for yourself, people will come and they will also by default create new spaces for themselves.
Yes. Allow them to
And
have their growth journey that works for them.
Yes.
Don't force it on them.
It happens organically.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I love that. So yeah, I think that's a good way to actually just bring this to an end. I know this topic is really, really massive, but you know, we almost want to just touch on it and
Yes.
put it into something compact so people can watch it. But yeah, that's the thing. You know, define your new space and understand how that's going to work for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a wrap.
Yes.
That was amazing. I think we really need to have more of these discussions,
Yes.
and I'm looking forward to the future discussions about many topics that's affecting Muslim women. And I'm looking forward to some of the engagement on this topic after we post this.
Yes, I love the engagement. I want to know your thoughts. It's going to be exciting to engage on this. And you know what? I want to talk about marriage and divorce next.
I want to talk about marriage and divorce.
Wherever you put the comments, up to you. I just said what I want to talk about.
Because one of the massive things that we need to deal with next, which is also very, very directly impacted or influenced by this patriarchal structures that we've got, is how do we navigate divorce as Muslim women?
Awesome.
Right? And I just said we and Muslim women the same time. How do our Muslim women navigate divorce?
Let's backtrack.
Just to be clear,
Backpedal.
I have no identity crisis. I don't know
Okay,
exactly
but
what my
yeah,
place is, but
That's awesome.
but that's a very important discussion that I think is a natural progression from this discussion.
Cool. So let's put a pin in it, and that will be our next discussion, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Did you get permission from your husband to be here? You're not supposed to swear on camera. I can't beep it out.
Oh, why do you want to ask me such stupid questions?
Patriarchy, seriously? Like the banter?
Okay, let's start again.
Ay, ay, ay.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.